My name is Maya. I am 32 years old, and my family truly believed they had destroyed me. It was exactly 1:57 in the morning when two armed police officers kicked in the custom mahogany door of my downtown penthouse. "You are under arrest for grand estate fraud," the lead officer shouted, stepping over the shattered wood with his hand resting on his weapon. I did not scream. I did not panic. I simply sat back on my leather sofa, took a slow, deliberate sip of my bourbon, and smiled at the crowd standing in my hallway. Right behind the cops were my own parents, Desmond and Yvonne, their faces glowing with absolute malicious pride. My younger sister Chloe had her phone shoved forward loudly, live streaming my arrest to her 2 million loyal followers. Her white husband Trent, the supposed real estate genius, and the mastermind behind this entire ambush, strutted forward. He tossed a thick manila folder onto my glass coffee table with a triumphant smirk. "There is the hard evidence of the $4 million you drained from the family trust," he sneered, looking down at me like I was garbage. My mother actually clapped her hands together. "We finally caught you, Maya," she said, her voice dripping with pure disgust. I did not fight back. I did not even try to explain myself to the officers. I calmly stood up, smoothed out my silk pajamas, and offered my hands, letting the cold steel handcuffs click tightly around my wrists. Chloe made sure to get a tight camera shot of the cuffs for her live audience, laughing gleefully as the officers marched me out of my own home. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully framed the outcast of the family and secured the millions for Trent's sketchy business ventures. But less than an hour later at the downtown precinct, their perfect victory completely unraveled. The intake officer aggressively grabbed my hand to run my fingerprints through the national database. I watched the computer screen immediately flash a bright restrictive red. The officer turned pale white, his eyes wide with sheer panic as he scrambled away from the desk without saying a single word. 10 long minutes later, the heavy door to the interrogation room swung open. The chief of police walked in, sweating profusely. He ordered the other detectives out of the room, swallowed hard, and looked at me with a shaking voice. "Ma'am," he stammered, "we had absolutely no idea you are a senior federal agent." Before I reveal the exact look on their faces when they realized who I truly work for, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been stabbed in the back by your own blood, only to serve them the absolute sweetest revenge imaginable. To fully grasp the absolute absurdity of the trap they thought they had set, we need to rewind to the exact moment Trent laid out his grand masterpiece right in the center of my living room. While the two police officers stood by the door with their hands resting on their utility belts, the real performance was happening right in front of my coffee table. The entire room buzzed with a chaotic, manic energy. My family moved around me like a hurricane of righteous indignation, desperate to watch me drown. Meanwhile, I sat completely motionless on my sofa, the calm and quiet eye of their self-made storm. Trent was pacing back and forth across my expensive Persian rug. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit, making sure he looked every bit the successful luxury real estate developer he pretended to be. He was playing the role of the noble savior, the brilliant white knight who had swooped in to rescue his vulnerable black in-laws from their greedy, deceitful eldest daughter. He dramatically picked up the thick manila folder he had tossed down moments earlier and pulled out several stacks of paper. He waved them in the air like a winning lottery ticket, making sure the police officers and my sister's phone camera could see the bold red lettering on the front. I tried to give Maya the benefit of the doubt. Trent said, his voice dripping with fake sorrow as he looked at the officers. "When Desmond and Yvonne trusted me to manage the $4 million trust left by their grandfather, I promised to protect their legacy. I was running a routine audit for our upcoming luxury resort project to integrate the trust funds, but the escrow numbers did not add up. I hired an independent financial investigator, and we dug deep into the family accounts." Trent paused for dramatic effect, placing a hand over his heart. What I found sickened me, he continued. Maya used her position as a certified public accountant to bypass the dual authorization security on the trust. She transferred the entire $4 million into a series of offshore shell companies based in the Cayman Islands. She tried to bankrupt her own parents. He stepped closer and dropped the forged bank statements directly onto my lap. I did not flinch. I simply cast my eyes down to look at his handiwork. It was almost laughable. The banking logos at the top of the pages were slightly pixelated. The routing numbers he used did not match standard international wire formats. He had even forged my digital signature on the authorization lines, but the timestamp formatting was completely incorrect for the banking software he claimed I used. It was a sloppy, arrogant forgery created by a con artist who was entirely too used to dealing with gullible victims. But to my parents, those pieces of paper were absolute undeniable proof of my guilt. Trent turned back to the officers, handing them a secondary file. I have sworn affidavits here from my financial team. He lied smoothly. They tracked the IP addresses used to authorize the transfers, and they traced directly back to Maya's personal computer right here in this apartment. How else do you think a standard tax accountant affords a multi-million-dollar penthouse with skyline views? She has been siphoning funds for months. The $4 million was just the final greedy blow. He gestured dramatically to my high-end furniture and the expansive glass windows, using my own hard-earned success as weaponized proof of my alleged corruption. My father Desmond stood behind Trent with his arms crossed over his chest. He shook his head in deep theatrical disgust. He looked at Trent like the man walked on water, then looked at me as if I were a stranger he caught stealing from his wallet. We gave you everything. Maya. My father spat, his voice echoing loudly in the high-ceilinged room. We trusted you. Trent has been working day and night to build real generational wealth for this family. He knows how the system works. He knows how to elevate us. And instead of supporting your sister's husband, you tried to steal our future out of pure spite. You are nothing but a petty, miserable thief. My mother, Yvonne, immediately stepped up beside my father. She pointed a sharply manicured finger inches from my face. You could never stand that Chloe married a successful man, she yelled, her face contorted with anger. You have always been jealous of her. You sit in your boring little cubicle crunching numbers all day while Chloe builds a massive brand. Trent saved us tonight. He exposed you. He is more of a son to me than you ever were a daughter. Through all of this, Chloe was circling the room with her phone held high. She had her ring light attached, ensuring her face was perfectly illuminated as she broadcast my supposed downfall to her 2 million followers. Oh my God, you guys, Chloe said to her screen, faking a tearful tremble in her voice. I am literally shaking right now. My own sister tried to ruin us. Trent is a literal hero for catching this. Thank you all for the supportive comments. Yes, the police are here. Justice is finally being served. She shoved the camera right into my face, trying to capture a reaction. She wanted tears. She wanted me to beg for forgiveness. She wanted a viral moment of me breaking down and confessing to my crimes. I gave her absolutely nothing. I remained perfectly still. I did not raise my voice. I did not try to defend myself to my parents. I did not try to explain to the police that the documents in my lap were fabricated. I just sat there, breathing slowly and evenly, watching them celebrate their false victory. My absolute silence seemed to unnerve Trent just a fraction. He stopped pacing and stared at me, his smug smile faltering for a single second as he tried to figure out why I was not panicking. He expected me to scream, to fight the police, to make a desperate scene that would only make me look more guilty. He had severely underestimated exactly who he was dealing with. I slowly looked up from the forged bank statements and locked eyes directly with Trent. The room was loud with my mother's continuous insults and my sister's live stream chatter. But in that moment, it felt like it was only Trent and me in the room. I let a small knowing smirk touch the corner of my lips. I watched his throat swallow hard. He knew he had cornered me, but my lack of fear was a variable he had not calculated. He had no idea that his forged documents were not the trap he thought they were. They were the exact pieces of evidence I needed to lock him away for a very long time. The silence between Trent and me was abruptly shattered when my mother stepped directly into my line of sight. Yvonne could not stand to be ignored. She misinterpreted my deadly calm for arrogance, and it fueled her rage to a boiling point. She crossed her arms, looking down at me with a sneer that wrinkled her heavily contoured face. "Look at her," she spat, her voice vibrating with pure venom. "Look at how cold and calculating she is. Any normal daughter would be on her knees begging for forgiveness. Any normal person would be sobbing, apologizing to her family for tearing them apart. But not Maya. She is sitting there like she owns the world. She is a sociopath." Yvonne began to pace her expensive designer heels, clicking aggressively against my hardwood floors. "You have always been exactly like this," she yelled, pointing a trembling finger at my chest. "From the time you were a little girl, you thought you were better than us. You read your heavy books, got your little accounting degree, and looked down your nose at your own blood. You thought your corporate job made you superior. But a degree does not teach you loyalty. A corporate badge does not teach you how to build real generational wealth. Trent brought us an opportunity to step out of the middle class and into the elite. He showed us how the real players move money. He took this family under his wing, and you simply could not stand that a white man came into this family and achieved in 1 year what you could never do in your entire miserable life." Her words were meant to cut deep, designed to strike at the core of my identity, but they only bounced off the armor I had spent years building. My mother was projecting all her own insecurities, her deep-seated worship of status and wealth, directly onto me. She was so blinded by the shiny veneer Trent presented that she willingly sacrificed her own flesh and blood to protect his illusion. Sensing that my mother was delivering premium drama for her audience, Chloe rushed forward. The chaotic, jittery energy of her movements made the room feel like it was spinning. She shoved her phone so close to my face that the blinding white halo of her portable ring light burned my retinas. The bright light washed out the room, creating a sharp, jarring contrast between her frantic, shaking camera work and my absolutely anchored presence on the sofa. "Oh my God, you guys are absolutely right in the chat," Chloe squealed, her voice pitched high for maximum theatrical effect. She read the scrolling comments aloud, weaponizing her digital mob against me in real time. User RealTalk99 says put her away for life. Thank you for the super hearts, guys. Yes, it is so traumatic. Trent is literally shaking right now because he worked so hard to save my parents from bankruptcy. And she is just sitting there. Look at her eyes, guys. She is not even crying. She is literally a monster. Chloe pushed the phone even closer, the lens hovering mere inches from my nose. The phone shook violently in her manicured hand. "Say something to the camera." "Maya," she demanded, her voice shrill and demanding. "Tell my 2 million followers why you tried to leave our parents homeless. Tell them why you hate our success so much. Tell them how you thought you could steal $4 million and get away with it." I did not blink. I stared straight through the glaring halo of the ring light, my focus pulling sharply from the chaotic, shaky phone directly into the lens. I let the silence stretch out heavy and suffocating. I knew exactly what was happening on the other side of that screen. 2 million strangers were typing furious insults, judging my lack of emotion, condemning me as a greedy, jealous spinster. Chloe thought she was conducting a masterclass in public cancellation. She believed she was tearing my reputation to shreds in front of the entire world, ensuring I would never be able to show my face in polite society again. What my dear sister completely failed to realize was that she was currently providing the Department of Justice with a perfectly preserved high-definition digital record of her own complicity. Every word she spoke, every comment she read aloud, every time she panned the camera to show Trent and my parents standing over me with triumphant smiles, she was cementing their roles in a massive federal investigation. She was not broadcasting my demise. She was directing, producing, and starring in the prosecution's opening statement. Her live stream was a gift, a tightly packaged piece of evidence that would prove exactly who was in the room and who supported the fraudulent documents Trent had just handed to the police. Yvonne stepped into the frame, eager to get her share of the digital spotlight. "Tell them how she manipulated your father and me," My mother urged, placing a comforting hand on Chloe's shoulder. Tell your followers how she used her position as a certified public accountant to trick us. We trusted her because she is family. We thought she was safeguarding your grandfather's hard-earned legacy, but she is a snake. She has always been a snake. She is dead to me. As of tonight, I only have one daughter, and I only have one son. She gestured lovingly toward Trent, who puffed out his chest, looking incredibly pleased with himself. The sheer delusion in my mother's voice was almost fascinating to witness. She had completely rewritten history to cast herself as the innocent victim of a scheming mastermind. She conveniently forgot the night she slapped me across the face for daring to question Trent's ledgers. She conveniently forgot how she called me a miserable wage worker and forced me to sign away my guardianship of the trust. Now playing to an audience of millions, she was the grieving matriarch who had been deeply betrayed. You are going to lose everything, Maya Chloe whispered maliciously from behind the phone, dropping her influencer persona for a brief ugly second. This penthouse, your boring little job, your fake reputation, it is all gone. I'm going to make sure every single person in this city knows exactly what a toxic, pathetic thief you really are. Trent is going to take that money, finish his luxury resort, and we are going to be billionaires while you rot in a federal cell. The lead police officer, growing increasingly impatient with the circus unfolding in my living room, stepped forward and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. All right, that is enough of the broadcast, he said, his voice carrying the gruff authority of someone who just wanted to process the paperwork and end his shift. Time to go, lady. Stand up. I stood up gracefully, keeping my movements slow and deliberate so the handcuffs would not catch uncomfortably on my wrists. I looked at Yvonne, who was glaring at me with unfiltered hatred. I looked at Chloe, whose phone was still recording my every move with frantic, shaky energy. And finally, my gaze pulled back into sharp focus on Trent. He had retreated to the edge of the room, still wearing that arrogant smirk, confident that he had just eliminated the only obstacle standing between him and $4 million. Let us go, I said softly to the officer, my voice steady and completely devoid of fear. I have an important meeting to get to. My family interpreted my words as pure delusion, another sign of my supposed sociopathy. Chloe laughed out loud, a harsh grating sound that echoed down the hallway as the officers escorted me toward the elevator. They genuinely thought the game was over. They thought they had successfully buried me. They were about to learn that they had not buried me at all. They had just planted a seed, and the harvest was going to be absolutely devastating. The heavy steel of the handcuffs clicked shut with a sharp metallic finality that echoed through the high ceilings of my penthouse. The lead officer grabbed my bicep, pulling me fully upright. From the floor level, anyone looking up at me would not see a broken woman. They would see absolute authority. Even with my hands bound behind my back, I squared my shoulders, raised my chin, and looked down at the people who shared my DNA. I was the one in custody, yet I possessed all the power in the room. You have the right to remain silent. The officer began, his voice a dull drone, reciting words he had spoken 1,000 times before. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I listened to the Miranda warning as if it were a symphony played entirely for my amusement. My mother, Yvonne, closed her eyes and let out a long, dramatic sigh of relief, as if a great evil was finally being purged from her life. My father stood tall, nodding his head in solemn agreement with the officer's words. Chloe thrust her phone closer to capture the audio, whispering to her 2 million viewers that justice was finally happening. You have the right to an attorney? The officer continued, gently turning me toward the shattered remains of my front door. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Trent was standing near the kitchen island, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. He had the relaxed, arrogant posture of a man who believed he had just executed the perfect crime. He had successfully manipulated my parents, stolen their $4 million trust, and pinned the entire embezzlement on the only person in the family smart enough to catch him. He thought he was brilliant. Do you understand the rights I have just read to you? The officer asked. I understand them perfectly, I replied, my voice smooth and utterly devoid of the panic they all desperately craved. The officer nudged me forward. Let us go. I took one step toward the ruined doorway, my bare feet avoiding the jagged splinters of mahogany scattered across the marble floor. Then I stopped. I anchored my weight and refused to move forward. The sudden halt caught the officers off guard, and they pulled slightly on my arms, but I held my ground. I did not struggle, but I made it clear I was not leaving until I said exactly what I wanted to say. I slowly turned my head over my shoulder. My gaze bypassed my mother's furious glare. I ignored my father's scowl. I did not even glance at Chloe's glowing camera lens. My eyes locked onto Trent. The room felt eerily quiet. For a brief second, the chaotic energy of my family vanished, replaced by a sudden heavy tension. They were waiting for me to beg. They were waiting for the tears, the apologies, the desperate pleas for my father to intervene. Instead, I offered a soft, chilling smile. "Are you absolutely sure those papers you handed them are the originals, Trent?" I asked. The words hung in the air, sharp and precise. Trent froze. His hands, which had been confidently adjusting his suit jacket just a moment prior, stopped completely dead. The arrogant smirk vanished from his face, replaced instantly by a rigid, hollow mask of confusion. "What did you just say?" Trent asked, his voice losing an octave of its previous swagger. I held his gaze, letting the silence stretch out to maximize the psychological damage. "Are you absolutely sure," I repeated slowly, letting every single syllable land like a physical blow, "that the documents you just gave the police are your original forged copies? Or did you pull them from the secondary folder you kept in your home office safe, the one you think nobody knows about?" It was a bluff, of course. I had no idea if he kept a secondary folder in a safe. But men like Trent always kept backups of their crimes, and they were always paranoid about being outsmarted. I watched the exact moment the seed of doubt took root in his brain. His eyes darted quickly to the manila folder resting in the hands of the second police officer. His breathing hitched. A microscopic bead of sweat broke out along his hairline. His mind began racing through a million terrifying calculations. Did he grab the wrong file in his rush to set me up? Did I somehow break into his house and swap the documents? If the police booked those files into evidence, and they contained the unedited offshore routing numbers, instead of the fake ones framing me, he had just handed the authorities a signed confession to his own massive Ponzi scheme. "What is she talking about?" "Trent?" My mother asked, her voice shrill and confused by the sudden shift in the room's dynamic. "She is just lying," Trent snapped, but his voice cracked ever so slightly. He quickly looked back at me, his eyes wide and searching my face for any sign of a bluff. "She is trying to confuse us. Take her away, officer. She is stalling." But the damage was already done. The absolute terror radiating from him was palpable. His chest rose and fell in short, shallow breaths. He took a half step toward the officer holding the folder, his fingers twitching as if he wanted to snatch the documents back and verify them for himself. He could not do it, of course. Touching evidence in front of the police would be a catastrophic mistake. He was trapped in a prison of his own paranoia, forced to watch the officers walk away with papers he suddenly was not entirely sure about. I let out a soft, amused chuckle. It was a rich, dark sound that echoed beautifully in the silent penthouse. "Have a wonderful night, Trent," I said cheerfully. "I highly recommend you spend it reviewing your personal files carefully." I turned my head forward again and gave a polite nod to the officer holding my arm. "I am ready now," I said. As the police escorted me out of my apartment and into the brightly lit corridor, the last sound I heard before the elevator doors closed was my sister Chloe complaining to her live stream that my reaction made absolutely no sense. She was right. It made no sense to a civilian. But to a federal agent who had just successfully baited a master manipulator into second-guessing his entire criminal enterprise, it made perfect sense. The elevator began its descent to the ground floor. The cold metal of the handcuffs pressed against my skin, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Trent was currently standing in my living room, surrounded by my oblivious family, losing his mind with worry. He would spend the rest of the night tearing his home office apart, terrified of what he might have accidentally handed over to the local police. Meanwhile, I was heading exactly where I needed to be. The trap was set. The bait was taken, and the local precinct was about to get the shock of a lifetime. The harsh neon streetlights bled through the reinforced plexiglass of the squad car, casting long, distorted shadows across the stiff vinyl back seat. The world outside tilted at severe, uncomfortable angles as the cruiser banked sharply around a corner, the wail of the sirens tearing through the quiet of the early morning. I sat in the back, the cold metal of the handcuffs biting into my wrists with every sudden bump in the road. The two officers in the front were completely silent, likely eager to finish booking the corporate criminal they genuinely believed they had just captured. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the rain-slicked streets, creating skewed, crooked reflections on the wet glass. It was a perfect physical mirror to the twisted, deeply toxic reality my family had constructed. But inside my mind, everything remained perfectly clear. I leaned my head against the cold window, watching the city blur past, and let my thoughts drift back to the exact moment the fuse was lit on this entire disaster. It had not started tonight with kicked-in doors and forged bank statements. It had started exactly 1 year ago over dry turkey and boxed stuffing. I closed my eyes, and the deafening sound of the police sirens faded away, instantly replaced by the clinking of fine silver and the booming, arrogant laughter of my brother-in-law. It was our first Thanksgiving without Grandpa Silas. The grief should have been heavy in the room, but instead my family's dining room was buzzing with a palpable, greedy energy. Grandpa Silas had been a frugal, hardworking man who spent 50 years running a modest chain of auto repair shops. He had faced decades of discrimination, redlining, and systemic barriers to quietly amass a fortune that none of them knew about until the will was read. He had left behind a $4 million trust, and because he knew exactly who my parents were and how recklessly they handled money, he had made me the co-guardian of those funds. Trent had stood at the head of the long dining table, wearing a cashmere sweater that cost more than my mother's entire holiday spread. He held a glass of expensive wine, commanding the room with the easy, unearned confidence of a white man who knew his black in-laws desperately craved his proximity to wealth and status. He had laid out a glossy, oversized brochure right next to the gravy boat. It was a pitch for a luxury eco-resort in the Caribbean. According to Trent, it was a guaranteed gold mine and exclusive investment opportunity that was only available to elite players. And out of the goodness of his heart, he was willing to let the family trust buy into the ground floor. My mother Yvonne had practically swooned. My father Desmond looked at the brochure like it was a holy relic delivered straight from above. Chloe was already pulling out her phone, planning her influencer content around the VIP suites and infinity pools. But I had sat there, the invisible accountant, and asked the questions absolutely no one else wanted to ask. I set my fork down and looked directly at the glossy rendering of a resort that did not yet exist. "What are the zoning permits for this island?" I had asked, my voice cutting sharply through their delusional celebration. "Where are the actual financial projections, Trent? Not the marketing brochure, the actual escrow ledgers and the independent risk assessments. You are asking us to dump Grandpa Silas's entire legacy into an offshore development that does not even have a guaranteed groundbreaking date or a secured construction firm." Trent had sighed, utilizing that patronizing, heavy sigh of someone forced to explain basic addition to a stubborn child. "Maya, you are looking at this like a mid-level tax preparer," he had said smoothly, offering a condescending smile to my parents. "Real estate at this level requires vision. It requires relationships and aggressive capital movement. You are stuck in the mindset of playing it safe, which is exactly why you will always be working for someone else. I am offering this family a seat at the billionaire's table, and you are worried about zoning permits." My father had slammed his fist on the table, making the fine china rattle dangerously. "You have absolutely no vision," Maya Desmond had yelled, his face twisting with deep, ugly resentment. "Trent is bringing us a massive opportunity to build real generational wealth. He has the connections. He knows the right people. You are just jealous because Chloe married a man who actually knows how to elevate this family, while you sit alone in your apartment crunching numbers for pennies." Yvonne had chimed in immediately, her voice dripping with venom as she pointed the silver carving knife in my direction. Your grandfather made a massive mistake putting you in charge of anything. You have always been bitter. You cannot stand to see your sister happy, and you cannot stand to see Trent succeed. You are actively trying to sabotage the only real chance we have to step out of the middle class and into the elite circles where we belong. I remembered looking down at the glossy brochure. The numbers printed on the heavy cardstock were absurd. The projected returns were mathematically impossible. It possessed all the classic glaring hallmarks of a high-yield investment fraud. A textbook Ponzi scheme designed to drain capital from eager, unsophisticated investors. But trying to explain financial forensics to people blinded by greed and social climbing was like speaking to a brick wall. I had demanded independent audits of his firm. I had refused to sign over the funds. And that singular refusal had instantly made me enemy number one in my own household. A sudden violent jolt of the police cruiser brought me momentarily back to the present. The rain was coming down harder now, the windshield wipers slapping rhythmically against the glass. The officer in the passenger seat glanced back at me through the heavy wire mesh, his expression a mix of professional pity and disdain. He probably thought I was sitting back here reminiscing about my crimes, wondering where my life of embezzlement went wrong. He had absolutely no idea that I was mapping out the exact trajectory of my federal sting operation. The memory of that Thanksgiving night shifted to the immediate aftermath of the dinner. Trent had cornered me in the kitchen while my parents were busy fawning over Chloe in the living room. He had dropped the friendly, charismatic savior act the very second we were alone. He had crowded into my personal space, blocking the doorway, smelling of expensive scotch and arrogant entitlement. "You are going to sign off on that transfer, Maya," he had whispered, his voice low, sharp, and threatening. "Desmond and Yvonne are already drawing up the legal paperwork to have you removed as co-guardian for breach of fiduciary duty. They will drag your name through the mud. They will claim you are mentally unfit to manage finances. They will do whatever it takes to get this money, and they will absolutely destroy you in the process. You can either sign the papers and step aside quietly, or you can lose your entire family and your reputation. Your choice." Trent genuinely thought he was manipulating a weak, insecure desk worker. He thought his intimidation tactics would break my resolve and force me into submission. But what he did not realize was that his aggressive, sweating desperation to access those specific offshore funds had triggered every single red flag I had been trained to look for at the Department of Justice. My actual job was hunting sophisticated financial predators. Trent had just painted a massive glowing target on his own back and walked right into my federal crosshairs. Chloe had walked into the kitchen right as Trent backed away laughing as she shoved her massive diamond engagement ring toward my face. "You are just mad because no man will ever look at you the way Trent looks at me," she had mocked. "You are going to die alone with your spreadsheets, Maya, while we are living on private islands." The sheer staggering cruelty of it all had solidified my plan. Grandpa Silas had worked his hands to the bone to save that money. And Desmond and Yvonne were practically tripping over themselves to hand it over to a smooth-talking con artist who promised them entry into a country club lifestyle they had never earned. The police cruiser took another sharp-leaning turn, the tires hissing loudly against the wet asphalt. We were getting closer to the downtown precinct, the exact precinct where Trent's carefully constructed house of cards was about to meet a federal wrecking ball. I leaned back against the stiff vinyl seat and let the rhythmic flash of the police lights wash over my face in the dark. I had let them push me. I had played the role of the defeated, overpowered sister perfectly over the last year. I had let Trent believe he was the smartest man in the entire room. Because a predator only strikes when he truly believes his prey is defenseless, and my family was about to learn a devastating lesson about who was actually the prey. The memory sharpened with crystal clarity, pulling me out of the cold reality of the police cruiser and dropping me right back into the suffocating heavy air of my father's home office. It was exactly 1 week after that initial Thanksgiving dinner. Trent had called an emergency family meeting to finalize the transfer of the $4 million trust. If you were standing just behind my parents in that room, looking strictly over their eager, tense shoulders, you would have seen Trent framed like a modern-day savior descended from the heavens. He stood in front of my father's massive oak bookshelf, bathed in the warm amber light of a desk lamp, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that fit him flawlessly. He commanded the room with practiced, effortless grace. He used his hands smoothly as he spoke, spinning a magnificent, intoxicating web of buzzwords. He talked about high-yield liquidity, offshore tax havens, exclusive Cayman backing, and guaranteed triple-digit returns within the first fiscal year. My parents sat side by side on a plush leather love seat, hanging on to his every single word, as if he were preaching gospel. My mother Yvonne had her hands clasped tightly under her chin, her eyes wide with dreams of country club memberships and luxury cars she could finally parade in front of her judgmental friends. My father Desmond leaned so far forward he was practically at the edge of his seat, nodding vigorously at financial concepts I knew for an absolute fact he did not understand. Trent paced slowly, holding up a beautifully bound glossy prospectus. "I wanted to bring this to you first," he said, letting his voice drop to a humble, intimate register. "My other investors in New York and London are practically begging for this allocation. They are ready to wire funds right now. But Chloe and I talked about it, and we agreed that family comes first. I want to see you secure your legacy, Desmond. I want to see this family rise to the top tier where you belong. You have worked hard your whole lives, and it is time your money works for you." It was a brilliant performance. It was the exact script every high-level fraudster uses to separate desperate status-hungry people from their life savings. I sat quietly in a wingback chair in the corner of the room, a sleek digital tablet resting on my lap. I had let him talk for 20 uninterrupted minutes, allowing him to paint his masterpiece of deception. But as a forensic auditor, my entire career was based on ignoring the beautiful paint and looking directly at the structural rot underneath. I set my tablet down on the side table. The soft clack of the metal casing hitting the wood echoed loudly, snapping my parents out of their trance. "Trent," I said, keeping my tone perfectly flat and professional. "This brochure is very pretty. The rendered images of the infinity pools and the private cabanas are gorgeous. But you are asking my father to liquidate a federally insured trust and funnel $4 million into a newly formed, unregulated, limited liability company." Trent stopped pacing. The warm, inviting smile on his face tightened just a fraction of an inch, but he quickly smoothed it out. "Maya," he said, using that patronizingly patient tone again, "we have been over this. The LLC structure is designed specifically to protect the family from personal liability while maximizing the offshore tax benefits. It is standard practice for elite developments." I did not break eye contact. "If it is standard practice, then you will have no problem providing standard documentation," I replied calmly. "I want to see the actual escrow ledgers. I want the Schedule K-1 forms for the other investors you claim are already on board. I want the operating agreement for the LLC, the names of the board of directors, and the routing numbers for the offshore accounts holding the capital. I am a certified public accountant and the co-guardian of this trust. I am not signing over a single cent until I trace the digital footprint of this entire operation." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees in a matter of seconds. Chloe, who had been sitting on the armrest of Trent's chair, rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Oh my God, Maya," she groaned loudly. "Do you always have to ruin everything with your boring, depressing negativity?" Trent let out a long, heavy breath and looked down at his expensive leather shoes. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, playing the role of a deeply wounded, misunderstood benefactor. He looked up at my father with an expression of profound disappointment. "Desmond, I have to be honest with you," Trent said softly. "It is incredibly difficult to do business in an environment where there is zero trust. I am bringing you the deal of a lifetime, a deal that my colleagues would kill for, and I am being interrogated like a common criminal by your own daughter. If Maya does not want me to help this family, I can walk away right now. I can give this allocation to my investors in London. I just thought we were building something special together." It was the ultimate manipulation. Trent dangled the golden carrot of elite wealth and threatened to snatch it away perfectly, blaming my caution for their potential loss. The reaction was explosive and immediate. Desmond sprang to his feet. his face twisting into a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. He crossed the room in 3 long, aggressive strides. Before I could even register the violent shift in his body language, his hand swung through the air. The slap echoed through the study like a gunshot. The force of my father's hand striking my cheek threw my head violently to the side. A sharp, high-pitched ringing erupted in my left ear. The sudden explosive pain radiated down my jawline, and I instantly tasted the warm, metallic tang of blood where my teeth had cut into the inside of my cheek. I froze my hand gripping the armrest of the chair as the room spun slightly. "You ungrateful, miserable wretch!" Desmond screamed, his voice shaking the framed photographs on his office walls. "How dare you sit in my house and disrespect this man?" I slowly turned my head back to face him, ignoring the stinging heat radiating across my skin. My mother was standing now, pointing an accusing finger at me, completely unfazed by the fact that her husband had just struck her child across the face. "You are jealous!" Desmond roared, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. His eyes were wide and wild with a terrifying absolute worship for the man standing across the room. "You have always been jealous of your sister. You cannot stand that Chloe went out and found a wealthy, well-connected white man. You cannot stand that he has the power and the network to elevate this family into circles you could never even dream of entering. You are just a bitter, lonely, low-level worker who wants to drag everyone else down into your own miserable reality." Yvonne stepped up right behind him, her voice shrill and merciless. "Trent is a blessing to this family," she shouted. "He is handing us the world on a silver platter, and you are demanding ledgers. You are a disgrace, Maya. You will sign the papers removing yourself from that trust right now, or you will pack your bags and you will never set foot in this house again. You are nothing to us compared to what he is offering." I sat there breathing slowly through my nose, letting the horrific reality of their words wash over me. My own parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, were actively discarding me for the shiny illusion of proximity to white wealth. They had completely internalized their own inferiority, and they were willing to sacrifice their eldest daughter on the altar of Trent's false promises. I looked past my father's furious shouting face and locked eyes with Trent. He was standing slightly behind my parents, out of their direct line of sight. And there it was. The mask slipped for just one fraction of a second. Trent was looking right at me, and he was smiling. It was a cold, victorious, deeply wicked smirk. He had won. He had successfully weaponized my parents' greed and internalized racism against me. He had turned them into his loyal attack dogs. That was the exact moment the final thread of familial loyalty snapped inside my chest. That was the moment I stopped being Maya the daughter and fully became Maya the federal agent. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I reached up, wiped a small drop of blood from the corner of my mouth with my thumb, and looked at my father with eyes completely devoid of emotion. "Bring me the transfer papers," I said quietly. My father scoffed, thinking he had physically intimidated me into submission. He snatched the legal documents from his desk and shoved them into my lap, handing me a heavy gold pen. I signed my name on the dotted line, legally surrendering my co-guardianship and handing Trent the absolute power to move the $4 million out of the secure family trust. Chloe cheered loudly, clapping her hands together, while Yvonne pulled Trent into a massive celebratory hug. They celebrated their victory completely blind to the fact that I had not just signed away the money. I had just officially given Trent the necessary legal rope to hang himself. As I walked out of that house, the sting of the slap still burning on my cheek, my mind was already executing the tactical response. They wanted to play in the elite circles of high finance. They wanted to worship a corporate predator. I was going to let them have exactly what they wanted, and then I was going to bring the entire federal government crashing down on their heads. If a lens were capturing the exact moment my family's fate was sealed, it would have started with an extreme close-up on the tip of my father's heavy gold pen, pressing hard against the thick parchment of the legal transfer document. You would hear the sharp, aggressive scratch of the ink bleeding into the fibers of the paper as I carved my signature onto the dotted line. Then the camera would slowly zoom out, pulling back from the document to reveal my face. You would not see a defeated, humiliated daughter crying over a stolen inheritance or a stinging cheek. You would see cold, calculating eyes staring straight ahead. You would see an apex predator mathematically plotting the exact trajectory of her kill. My father, Desmond, genuinely thought that physical signature was the end of the war. My mother, Yvonne, believed her cruel words had finally broken my spirit. Trent, with his arrogant smirk and his tailored suit, thought handing him that piece of paper magically unlocked Grandpa Silas's vault. But high-level financial crime does not operate on paper alone. It operates on encrypted digital authorizations, and Trent was entirely too stupid to realize I still held the digital keys. Walking out of my parents' house that Thanksgiving night, the freezing rain cutting through my thin coat felt like an absolute baptism. The sting of my father's slap was still burning hot across my jawline, a physical reminder of exactly where their loyalties lay. They had sold their own flesh and blood down the river for a smooth-talking white con artist who promised them country club memberships and imaginary offshore wealth. I got into my car, locked the doors, and did not drive away. Instead, I reached into the hidden compartment of my bag and pulled out my government-issued, heavily encrypted laptop. The interior of my car was pitch black save for the harsh blue-white glow of the screen illuminating my bruised face. I connected to my secure mobile uplink and bypassed 3 separate layers of biometric security to access the Department of Justice internal network. Trent needed my digital release token to complete the wire transfer at the bank the following morning. He thought I was just going to log into a standard consumer banking portal, click approve, and cry myself to sleep. He was entirely oblivious to the fact that I was actively weaponizing the very money he was so desperate to steal. I opened the restricted federal command terminal. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I did not just authorize the release of the $4 million. I embedded a highly classified traceroute software protocol directly into the digital metadata of the wire transfer code. Think of it as a microscopic, indestructible digital tracking die used exclusively by the Anti-Money Laundering Task Force. Once the money left the secure family trust, that protocol permanently attached itself to every single digital cent. It did not matter how many offshore accounts Trent used to hide the cash. It did not matter how many Cayman Island shell companies, fake real estate portfolios, or cryptocurrency tumblers. He funneled the capital through. My software would follow the money like a starving bloodhound. Every single time a fraction of that $4 million moved across an international border or bounced between financial institutions, the hidden protocol pinged a secure federal server in Washington. By attaching that specific piece of code, I essentially turned Grandpa Silas's life savings into the most expensive, highly radioactive digital bait in federal history. Trent thought he was robbing his gullible black-in-laws. He had no idea he was actually stealing directly from a monitored federal honeypot. The very second he moved that money out of the United States, he instantly upgraded his crime from a local civil family dispute to international money laundering and felony wire fraud. I sat in my cold car that night and watched the progress bar on my screen hit 100%. The transfer authorization was sent. The trap was officially armed. I closed the laptop, wiped a single drop of blood from the corner of my mouth, and finally put the car in drive. For the next 12 months, I played the long game, the kind of agonizing, meticulous patience that separates federal agents from common cops. I let Trent buy his luxury sports cars. I let Chloe brag on her daily live streams about her husband's massive new real estate acquisitions, watching her flaunt designer bags purchased with stolen funds. I let Yvonne and Desmond parade around their social circles, boasting about their incoming elite wealth while completely ignoring the daughter they had violently discarded. I let them build their entire identities, their towering egos, and their lavish lifestyles on a fragile house of cards. I let them feel invincible, because the higher they climbed on Trent's mountain of lies, the more devastating the impact would be when I finally kicked out the foundational pillars. The sudden violent screech of the police cruiser's brakes snapped me out of the memory and back into the present moment. The squad car lurched to a heavy halt, the wet tires grinding aggressively against the slick concrete. We had arrived. Through the rain-streaked window, the looming concrete structure of the downtown precinct looked like a fortress. The harsh white floodlights illuminated the secured parking garage, casting long, imposing shadows against the brick walls. The officer in the front seat killed the wailing sirens, leaving only the rhythmic strobe-like flashing of the red and blue lights painting the damp interior of the car. He got out his heavy boots, splashing into a puddle, and walked around to the back door. He pulled it open, and the freezing damp city air rushed into the back seat, biting at my skin through my thin silk pajamas. "Let us go," he grunted, grabbing my upper arm with unnecessary force to haul me out of the vehicle. I stepped out of the cruiser, my bare feet hitting the freezing rain-soaked pavement. The steel handcuffs dug painfully into my wrists, but my posture remained completely unbroken. I squared my shoulders and raised my chin, ignoring the biting cold. I was not a defeated suspect being led into a cage. I was the architect walking into the final phase of my own masterclass. Trent thought he had weaponized the local police against me. He thought handing them those lazily forged documents would lock me away forever and tie up his loose ends. He had absolutely no clue that the very precinct we were walking into was about to become the epicenter of a massive federal takeover. He thought he had buried me, but he had merely handed me the shovel. And I was about to dig a grave so deep my family would never see the sunlight again. The heavy steel door of the interrogation room slammed shut behind me with a deafening thud that vibrated through the solid concrete walls. The space was deliberately designed to break human resolve. Harsh, cold, fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead, casting a sickly, sterile pallor across the small room. The air was stagnant, smelling faintly of stale coffee and the nervous sweat of 1,000 previous suspects. There were no windows, just 4 pale gray walls pressing inward, engineered to make the room physically feel like it was shrinking by the second. I sat on a rigid metal chair bolted directly to the scuffed linoleum floor. My hands remained cuffed tightly behind my back, forcing my spine to stay completely straight. I did not slouch. I did not fidget. I let my eyes trace the deep, chaotic scratches on the metal table in front of me, waiting patiently for the local talent to arrive and begin their highly predictable performance. 10 long minutes passed before the heavy door handle finally clicked. 2 detectives walked in, carrying themselves with the exaggerated, heavy-footed swagger of men who genuinely believed they held absolute authority over my life. The first was an older, broad-shouldered man with a graying mustache and a cheap, ill-fitting suit that strained across his chest. He looked exhausted, like a man bitterly counting the days until his municipal pension kicked in. The second was much younger, overly eager, and practically buzzing with the frantic adrenaline of landing what he thought was a massive corporate fraud case. The older detective did not even bother to introduce himself. He marched straight to the metal table and violently slammed Trent's thick manila folder right in the center. The sharp, explosive smack echoed loudly in the cramped, claustrophobic space. He leaned heavily across the table, planting his thick knuckles onto the cold metal, bringing his face uncomfortably close to mine. He reeked of cheap aftershave and stale tobacco, attempting to use his physical size to dominate my field of vision. "We know exactly what you did, Maya." The older detective growled, his voice a low, gravelly attempt at sheer intimidation. "Your golden brother-in-law handed us the holy grail of financial fraud tonight. We have the wire transfer logs. We have the offshore routing numbers. We have sworn signed affidavits from your own flesh and blood, detailing exactly how you manipulated your elderly grandfather's trust fund to finance your little luxury lifestyle. You thought you were so much smarter than everyone else, did you not?" The younger detective pulled up an aluminum chair and spun it around, sitting on it backward, like he had watched way too many daytime police procedurals. He was clearly playing the designated bad cop, aiming for maximum psychological pressure to crack my defenses. "You are looking at a minimum of 20 years in a federal penitentiary, lady," he barked, pointing a rigid finger directly at the folder. "Grand estate fraud, international wire fraud, embezzlement of vulnerable funds. The district attorney is going to make an absolute public example out of you. A certified public accountant robbing her own parents blind to live in a penthouse. The jury is going to eat you alive and spit out the bones. I sat completely motionless under the harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights. If this had been a normal suspect, a normal terrified civilian pulled from their bed in the middle of the night, this routine would have worked flawlessly. The manufactured claustrophobia, the loud, sudden noises, the rapid fire, legal threats carrying decades of prison time. It was a textbook psychological pressure cooker designed specifically to force a hasty, tearful confession. But I was not a civilian. I had helped draft the very interrogation manuals these two local cops were poorly attempting to quote from memory. I looked at the younger detective, then slowly shifted my unwavering gaze to the older one. My face remained a perfectly blank, impenetrable canvas. I did not blink. I did not break eye contact. The absolute chilling silence in the room began to stretch out, transforming their aggressive momentum into a sudden, highly awkward tension. They had fully expected me to cry. They had expected me to frantically beg for a lawyer or desperately try to shift the blame onto my family members. My utter lack of a pulse-raising reaction deeply unsettled them. The static cold light above us seemed to push downward, but instead of crushing me, it only highlighted the absolute control I maintained over my own breathing. The older detective slammed his hand on the table again, clearly agitated that his intimidation tactics were bouncing off me like water off a titanium hull. "Are you deaf?" he shouted, his face reddening under the unforgiving lights. "Your own mother and father signed statements against you tonight. Your sister handed over video evidence showing your complete lack of remorse. The white knight brother-in-law you tried to frame brought us the exact offshore account numbers you used to steal the money. The game is over. If you cooperate right now, if you confess and tell us exactly how to recover the $4 million you siphoned away, I will personally talk to the prosecutor. I will tell them you played ball. Maybe you only do 10 years instead of 20. But if you sit there and stay silent, I promise you, I will personally make sure you never see the outside of a concrete cell again." I allowed my eyes to drop down to the manila folder sitting between us on the scratched metal surface. The top flap was slightly open, revealing the edge of the forged bank statements Trent had so proudly printed out in his home office. Even from upside down and 2 feet away, the formatting errors were glaringly obvious to a trained forensic eye. The routing numbers lacked the required international SWIFT codes. The digital authorization timestamps were misaligned with standard Federal Clearinghouse protocols. Trent had used a basic commercially available accounting software to generate the fake ledgers, completely ignorant of the fact that real federal wire transfers generate encrypted metadata tags that cannot possibly be replicated on a home computer. These detectives were so eager to close a high-profile case that they had not bothered to run the documents past a certified financial investigator. They were holding a piece of counterfeit trash and treating it like a smoking gun. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the stale, heavy air fill my lungs, and finally broke my silence. My voice was calm, measured, and dangerously soft. It forced both detectives to lean in slightly, just to hear me instantly shifting the physical power dynamic of the room directly into my hands. "You have not verified a single piece of paper in that folder, have you?" I asked, my tone completely conversational, as if asking about the weather outside. The younger detective scoffed, standing up aggressively, the legs of his chair scraping harshly against the floor. "We do not need to verify anything tonight. We have your family's testimony and the paper trail right here. We have everything we need to lock you up and throw away the key. You have a heavily manipulated spreadsheet printed on expensive paper by a man who is actively trying to cover his own tracks." I corrected him, my gaze locking onto the older detective, recognizing him as the one who actually had the authority to make decisions in this room. "You barged into my home, placed me in handcuffs, and brought me down here based entirely on the word of a man you met less than 2 hours ago. You did not run a preliminary financial background check on his alleged development company. And more importantly, you clearly did not run a comprehensive background check on me before kicking in my door." The older detective let out a harsh, grating laugh that bounced off the cinder-block walls. He shook his head, looking at me with a mixture of profound pity and absolute exhaustion. "I know exactly who you are, lady," he sneered, tapping his thick index finger against the forged manila folder. "You are a local tax accountant who got greedy, got caught by a smarter man, and is now desperately trying to bluff her way out of a 20-year sentence. We do not need to run a background check to see what is sitting right in front of our faces." I did not break my posture. I simply tilted my head a fraction of an inch, my eyes boring directly into his. "You took a file from a man you met at 1 in the morning," I said, my voice cutting through his arrogant laughter like a scalpel. "You did not run his name through the Securities and Exchange Commission database. You did not cross-reference his so-called offshore accounts with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. And you did not even bother to properly process me at the front desk before dragging me into this room to play bad cop. You skipped the standard booking protocol because Trent promised you a high-profile open and shut case, and you were entirely too eager to claim the glory." The younger detective bristled, his face flushing a dark, angry red. "We skipped booking because we wanted to give you a chance to confess before you are permanently entered into the system as a federal felon," he snapped. "But if you want to do this the hard way, we can march you right out to the desk and fingerprint you right now." "I do not want to walk to the front desk," I replied smoothly, maintaining my absolute icy calm. "I want you to unhook my right hand, bring the portable biometric scanner into this room, and run my prints directly through the automated fingerprint identification system. Do not run a local municipal check. Run a direct query to the National AFIS registry. If I am the pathetic, low-level thief you claim I am, my prints will pull a blank record and you can gladly send me to a state cell. But if you are wrong, you are going to want to be standing behind a closed door when that screen refreshes." The older detective scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes toward the ceiling. "Let us humor the criminal mastermind," he grunted, gesturing sharply to his younger partner. "Go grab the digital pad from the intake desk. Let us put an end to this pathetic stalling tactic so we can process her and go home." The younger detective stormed out of the room, the heavy steel door slamming violently shut behind him. For 3 minutes, the older detective and I sat in total silence. He tried to stare me down, attempting to assert his dominance through pure physical presence. I simply watched him breathe, tracking the subtle nervous twitch of a muscle near his jaw. He was a man accustomed to seeing fear, and my complete lack of a pulse-raising reaction was beginning to deeply unnerve him. The door flew open again, and the younger detective marched back in, carrying a heavy, black, digital fingerprint scanner. He slammed it down onto the scratched metal table, plugging the thick USB cable into the battered computer tower sitting beneath the desk. He pulled a small set of keys from his belt, reached across the table, and unlocked the cuff biting into my right wrist. He immediately shackled my left arm to the heavy metal ring bolted to the table, ensuring I could only use one hand. "Press your fingers against the glass," the younger detective ordered, his voice dripping with venomous sarcasm. "Let us see what the big, scary national database has to say about our little tax accountant." I lifted my right hand, massaging the red bruised skin around my wrist for a brief second before reaching out toward the scanner. The thick rectangular glass pad lit up with a brilliant glowing green laser. The sequence of events that followed played out in a rapid, rhythmic series of sharp visual strikes. My index finger pressed firmly against the cool glass. A high-pitched electronic beep echoed in the small room. The younger detective aggressively clicked his plastic computer mouse, navigating away from the local precinct interface and selecting the federal AFIS portal. My middle finger pressed against the glass. Another sharp beep. The older detective crossed his arms over his chest, a smug, deeply satisfied smirk plastered across his tired face. My ring finger met the glowing green light. A third beep. The computer monitor displayed a spinning blue loading wheel calculating the intricate loops and whirls of my biometric data. "Run the query," I instructed softly, placing my hand flat back onto the metal table. The younger detective let out a heavy, mocking sigh, his finger slamming down on the mouse button to execute the search. We sat in silence as the outdated precinct computer struggled to process the outbound federal data packet. 1 second passed. 2 seconds passed. The older detective checked his wristwatch, clearly preparing to deliver his final triumphant speech about my impending prison sentence. Then the blue loading wheel froze completely dead. The dull gray interface of the local municipal police network glitched, pixelating violently for a fraction of a second before plunging into absolute pitch-black darkness. The gentle, quiet hum of the computer tower beneath the desk suddenly roared to life, the internal cooling fans spinning aggressively as the processor was hijacked by a massive external override. The younger detective stopped clicking. He jiggled the mouse frantically, his brow furrowing in deep annoyance. "What is wrong with this piece of junk?" he muttered, tapping the side of the monitor with his knuckles. "The system just crashed." "It did not crash," I said, my voice a quiet, chilling whisper in the dark room. "It is verifying." Suddenly, a blinding, glaring crimson banner erupted across the exact center of the monitor. The bright red light was so intense it reflected sharply off the sterile white walls of the interrogation room, painting the two detectives' faces in an eerie, bloody glow. A loud, high-pitched, digitized alert tone chimed sharply from the computer speakers, a harsh warning sound that pierced the heavy silence and made the older detective physically flinch backward in his chair. The younger detective's hand slowly fell away from the computer mouse. The smug, arrogant smirk was instantly wiped from his face, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated confusion. He leaned closer to the monitor, his eyes narrowing as he tried to process the impossible string of data currently locking down his entire workstation. This is not an arrest warrant. This is not a prior conviction record. This is not even a standard federal watch list hit. The older detective uncrossed his arms, the color rapidly draining from his cheeks. He leaned over his partner's shoulder, his eyes darting frantically across the glaring red screen. His jaw went completely slack. The heavy, confident swagger he had carried into the room evaporated into the cold air, replaced by a sudden suffocating wave of pure, unfiltered panic. They were staring at a total network blackout initiated directly by a superior federal agency, and the realization of what they had just stepped into was hitting them with the force of a freight train. The glaring crimson banner dominating the monitor did not just flash. It pulsed with an aggressive, rhythmic intensity, casting bloody shadows across the horrified faces of the two detectives. Directly beneath the flashing header, a block of stark white capitalized text burned into the screen reading, "Restricted DOJ Clearance Level 5. The words hovered there, absolute and unyielding. Below that, a secondary message scrolled across the bottom of the monitor, confirming the catastrophic error the precinct had just made. "Active federal operation interference logged. Immediate command level override initiated." The younger detective scrambled backward, his chair loudly scraping against the linoleum. He reached out with a trembling hand, frantically clicking the plastic mouse, desperately trying to close the window, to minimize the screen, to do absolutely anything to undo the digital nightmare he had just triggered. The mouse was entirely unresponsive. He slammed his fingers onto the keyboard, mashing the escape key, but the local network had completely revoked his access. The entire municipal system was frozen, hijacked by the Department of Justice to protect a high-level undercover asset. "What did you do?" the older detective hissed, grabbing his partner by the shoulder and pulling him away from the desk. "What the hell did you click?" "I just ran her prints through AFIS, like she asked." The younger man stammered, his voice cracking as pure panic set in. "I did not touch anything else. The system just took over." The high-pitched electronic alarm continued to chime from the computer tower, acting as a relentless, deafening countdown to their impending career destruction. I sat perfectly still, my left wrist still shackled to the metal ring on the table, watching the two men completely unravel. A few moments ago, they were towering over me, promising me decades in a federal penitentiary, utterly convinced they were the apex predators in this room. Now they looked like cornered prey, suffocating under the crushing weight of a jurisdiction they could not even begin to comprehend. Then came the sound of heavy, frantic footsteps pounding down the corridor outside. The camera pushes in fast as the heavy steel door of the interrogation room is violently kicked open. The heavy metal slammed against the concrete wall with a concussive boom, making both detectives physically jump. The chief of police stood in the doorway. He was a large, imposing man, but right now he looked entirely diminished. He had clearly thrown his uniform on in a blind panic. His shirt was untucked, his tie was missing, and his chest heaved with deep, ragged breaths as if he had sprinted all the way from his house to the precinct. A thick layer of cold sweat coated his forehead, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. He gripped the doorframe with white knuckles, his eyes darting frantically around the small room before locking directly onto me. When he saw me sitting there handcuffed to a scuffed metal table like a common street criminal, all the color instantly drained from his face. "Get away from her!" The chief roared, his voice cracking with a mixture of terror and fury. He lunged into the room, pointing a shaking finger at the two detectives. "Get away from her right now. Back against the wall. Do not say another word. Do not even breathe in her direction." The older detective raised his hands in a defensive gesture, his eyes wide with confusion. "Chief, what is going on?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Trent brought us a rock-solid file. We have forged bank statements. We have family testimonies. We were just processing her for estate fraud." "Shut your mouth!" the chief bellowed, his face turning a dangerous mottled purple. "You absolute fools! You ignorant, arrogant fools! You did not arrest a tax accountant for estate fraud. You just raided the home of a federal agent and dragged her into a municipal holding cell. You just compromised a multi-agency federal sting operation." The words landed like a physical bomb in the center of the cramped room. The younger detective literally stumbled backward until his shoulders hit the concrete wall. He stared at me, his jaw completely slack, his mind desperately trying to reconcile the image of the helpless sister he had been told about with the reality of the federal operative sitting in front of him. The older detective looked like he was going to be physically sick. He looked down at the manila folder sitting on the table, the forged documents that Trent had so proudly provided, and finally realized he had been played for an absolute fool. The chief did not wait for them to process the shock. He marched directly to the metal table, shoving the younger detective aside. He pulled a master key from his belt with shaking fingers. His hands trembled so violently that he fumbled twice before managing to slide the key into the heavy metal shackle binding my left wrist to the table. The lock clicked open. I slowly rolled my wrist, massaging the bruised skin where the metal had bitten into me. The chief then moved behind me, unlocking the cuffs that had bound my hands together for the past hour. As the heavy steel fell away, I stood up. I did not rush. I took my time, smoothing out the wrinkles in my silk pajamas, adjusting my posture until I stood at my full height. The physical shift in the room was absolute. I was no longer a suspect. I was the highest-ranking authority in the building. "Special Agent Maya," the chief stammered, taking a large deferential step backward. He kept his head slightly bowed, unable to meet my eyes directly. "I cannot begin to express my profound apologies. I received a priority red alert phone call from the Department of Justice Anti-Money Laundering Task Force commander in Washington less than 10 minutes ago. He informed me that my officers had kicked in the door of a level 5 cleared forensic auditor." He swallowed hard, wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "I am so incredibly sorry." These two detectives acted entirely on their own. They bypassed standard booking protocols. They did not run a preliminary federal database check. If they had, they would have seen the digital red flag on your residence. I take full responsibility for this catastrophic breach of protocol. Please tell me how we can rectify this immediately. We will put the entire precinct at your disposal." I looked at the chief, then slowly turned my gaze to the two detectives pressed against the wall. The older one was staring at his shoes, thoroughly defeated. The younger one looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. They had thought Trent was their golden ticket to a promotion. Trent had convinced them that I was a greedy, jealous sister trying to steal my family's wealth. Trent had weaponized their ambition, and in doing so, he had handed me the perfect audience for his ultimate destruction. I rolled my shoulders, feeling the tension release from my muscles. The local precinct had indeed compromised my physical location, but they had not ruined the operation. In fact, Trent thinking I was locked away in a municipal holding cell was the exact false sense of security I needed him to have. He was currently standing in my destroyed living room, surrounded by my cheering, oblivious family, believing he had won the war. He was going to sleep soundly tonight, confident that his $4 million offshore transfer was completely untraceable. "Chief," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the thick, terrified silence of the interrogation room, "you are not going to apologize to me. You are not going to discipline these detectives tonight. And you are absolutely not going to update the arrest log to show that I have been released from your custody." The chief blinked, totally bewildered by my commands. "I do not understand, Special Agent. You want us to keep you on the books as an active inmate." I walked over to the metal table and picked up Trent's forged manila folder. I weighed the fake evidence in my hands, a cold, predatory smile touching my lips. "The man who handed your detectives this folder is named Trent," I explained smoothly. "He is currently running an international Ponzi scheme utilizing fraudulent luxury real estate developments to launder tens of millions of dollars through Cayman Island shell companies. The $4 million he claims I stole tonight was actually bait. I authorized that transfer specifically to track his offshore routing network." I tossed the folder back onto the table. The papers spilled out, the fake banking logos completely exposed under the harsh lights. "Trent believes I am sitting in this exact room, facing decades in prison." I continued pacing slowly toward the door. "He believes he outsmarted me. Tomorrow morning, he is hosting a massive investor gala at his mansion to celebrate his fake resort development, using my family as his perfect, oblivious props. He is going to use that event to finalize the laundering of the funds offshore. If you release me on the record now, if you arrest him tonight for filing a false police report, his highly paid lawyers will have him out on bail by dawn, and he will permanently wipe every single server he owns." I stopped in front of the chief, locking eyes with him, projecting the full, unyielding weight of federal authority. "We are not going to arrest him for filing false paperwork, Chief. We are going to let him throw his party. We are going to let him stand in front of his wealthy investors and his 2 million live stream viewers. And then we are going to bring the entire federal government crashing through his front door." The chief stood absolutely frozen, processing the sheer magnitude of the operation that had just landed in his lap. The harsh overhead fluorescent lights hummed, casting deep, high-contrast shadows across his face. I leaned forward, stepping fully into the pool of stark white light, illuminating the center of the scratched metal table. The shift in my posture was deliberate and absolute. I shed the quiet, submissive stillness I had maintained since the raid, and fully embraced the commanding presence of a federal operative. I was taking complete control of the room, and every man standing before me knew it. "You need to understand exactly what we are dealing with here, Chief," I said, my voice commanding and precise, leaving absolutely no room for negotiation or doubt. "My family believes I am just a mid-level tax accountant grinding away in a boring corporate cubicle. They think my entire life revolves around filing quarterly returns and crunching numbers for local businesses. That carefully constructed lie was designed to protect my actual clearance. I am a senior forensic auditor for the Department of Justice, heading the primary strike team for the Anti-Money Laundering Task Force. I hunt apex financial predators, the kind of criminals who move billions of dollars across sovereign borders to fund international syndicates, human trafficking rings, and illegal arms dealers. I track the invisible digital footprints that tear down massive transnational criminal organizations." The two local detectives pressed against the wall exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated terror. The younger one looked as if he might pass out. The older detective slowly lowered his head, realizing the colossal scale of his earlier arrogance. "And Trent," I continued, letting a sharp, dangerous smile touch my lips, "is not a visionary luxury real estate developer. He is not the financial savior my parents desperately believe him to be. He is the central node in a massive, sprawling international Ponzi scheme that the federal government has been tracking for 2.5 years. He targets eager, status-hungry investors, promising them exclusive access to high-yield offshore resort developments that literally do not exist. He uses the fresh capital from new marks to pay off the early investors, creating a brilliant illusion of massive returns. But the vast majority of the money is siphoned off, washed through a labyrinth of shell companies in the Cayman Islands, and funneled directly into illicit offshore accounts. I stood up from the metal table and slowly paced the length of the small interrogation room. My crimson silk pajamas sharply contrasting with the dull gray concrete walls. Trent is incredibly careful, I explained, my tone turning analytical and sharp. He operates through layers of burner identities, encrypted communications, and proxy directors. The DOJ has known about his operation for years, but building a bulletproof case against a white-collar criminal of his caliber requires following the money while it is actively in motion. We needed to catch him in the act of laundering a significant, undeniable sum of money across an international border. We needed a wire transfer so large and so irrefutably tied to his biometric signature that his high-priced defense attorneys would not be able to argue it away as a simple administrative error. The chief wiped another layer of cold sweat from his brow, his eyes wide as he finally grasped the full scope of the trap. "The $4 million from your grandfather's trust," the chief whispered, his voice hoarse. "It was not stolen. It was a controlled delivery." "Exactly," I nodded, stopping my pacing and turning back to face him. Trent thought he had played the ultimate game of chess. He thought he had successfully manipulated my parents' greed and their deeply internalized desire for white validation. He convinced them to turn against their own daughter, to physically and emotionally abuse me until I handed over the keys to the family vault. He genuinely believed that forcing me to sign away my co-guardianship of the trust was his crowning achievement. I leaned back against the edge of the metal table, crossing my arms. He had no idea that I wanted him to take it. I needed him to take it. The moment I signed that transfer document in my father's home office, I embedded a highly classified tracking protocol directly into the digital metadata of the wire transfer. That $4 million is essentially a digital homing beacon. And right now, Trent is moving that beacon directly into the central nervous system of his entire offshore money laundering network. The younger detective, finding a small fraction of his voice, finally spoke up. "But why let him have the money at all? Why not just arrest him for the forgery and the coercion tonight?" I looked at the young detective, offering him a cold, pitying glance. "Because arresting him for local forgery gets him a slap on the wrist," I explained sharply. "It gives him time to post bail, call his fixers, and remotely wipe every server he owns. The DOJ does not want a local forgery conviction. We want the entire syndicate." Tomorrow morning, Trent is hosting an investor gala at his mansion. He has invited dozens of high-net-worth individuals to celebrate the launch of his fake Caribbean resort. He is going to use that highly publicized event to execute the final irrevocable transfer of the funds into his Cayman shell companies. The very second he hits execute on his laptop, he will permanently lock himself into 20 counts of federal wire fraud and international money laundering. I turned my attention back to the chief of police, ensuring he understood his precise role in the upcoming operation. "This is why I cannot walk out of your precinct tonight, Chief. My family and Trent are currently celebrating in my destroyed living room. They think they have permanently neutralized their only obstacle. If they get even a hint that I am free, if Trent checks the local arrest logs and sees my name cleared, he will instantly know he walked into a trap. He will abort the transfer, dump his hard drives, and flee the country before sunrise." The chief straightened his posture, finally regaining a fraction of his professional composure. He understood the assignment perfectly. "What do you need from us, Special Agent?" "I need you to maintain the absolute illusion of a successful arrest," I commanded. "You are going to book me into the system under a generic holding status. You will place me in a secure private holding cell, far away from the general population. You will confiscate my personal belongings, just like any other suspect, but you will allow me to keep my encrypted mobile device. My tactical strike team is currently mobilizing at the federal field office across town. I need to coordinate the breach timing with them." The chief nodded sharply, a look of profound respect replacing his earlier panic. "Understood completely. I will personally handle your processing to ensure no one else in the precinct flags the irregularity. And one more thing," I added, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. Trent might try to call the precinct in the morning. He will likely pretend to be a concerned family member asking about my bail status, just to verify that I am still behind bars. If he or my parents call your desk sergeant, is going to tell them that I am currently being processed for federal transfer and that bail has been denied. You are going to give them exactly the confirmation they need to feel completely invincible. Consider it done, the chief replied, stepping to the side and gesturing toward the door. We will get you secured immediately, Special Agent. The local level is completely locked down. I walked toward the door, my bare feet silent against the linoleum. The two detectives pressed themselves flat against the wall as I passed, terrified to even make eye contact. They had spent the entire night trying to break a woman they thought was a petty, jealous criminal. They had instead spent the night in a cage with an apex predator, and they were lucky to be walking out with their badges. As I stepped out of the interrogation room and into the quiet, dimly lit hallway of the precinct, I pulled my encrypted phone from the pocket of my silk pajamas. The screen illuminated my face with a soft blue glow. I had a message waiting from my tactical commander. The strike teams were assembled. The surveillance drones were locked onto Trent's mansion. The digital trap was primed and ready to snap shut. My family wanted to put on a show. They wanted to use me as a stepping stone to achieve their shallow, materialistic dreams. They wanted an audience of millions to watch me fall. Tomorrow morning, I was going to give them the biggest, most spectacular show of their entire lives. And I was going to ensure that every single one of them had a front row seat to their own absolute destruction. The heavy steel door of the interrogation room clicked shut behind me, but before I could even take 3 steps down the dimly lit corridor, the chief of police was right on my heels. If a camera were tracking us right now, it would be a tight handheld shot, shaking slightly with the urgent high-stakes energy vibrating through the air as we paced the length of the narrow hallway. The chief was practically vibrating with a sudden volatile mixture of embarrassment and righteous indignation. The sheer audacity of what Trent had done to his department was finally registering in his mind, and his local law enforcement pride was demanding an immediate aggressive response. "Special Agent, I understand the federal scope of this operation," the chief said, matching my rapid stride down the corridor. But that arrogant fraudster just weaponized my officers. He used my department to execute a malicious arrest based on fabricated evidence. That is a direct assault on the integrity of my precinct. I have a dozen armed patrol units sitting idle in the motor pool right now. I can have them at his luxury estate in exactly 8 minutes. We can kick his front door off its hinges, drag him out of his bed in zip ties, and book him on felony forgery, filing false police reports and obstruction of justice. We do not have to wait for the morning gala. We can end his night right now. He reached for the heavy black radio clipped to his shoulder strap, his thumb pressing down on the transmission button to dispatch his strike teams. I stepped directly into his path, raising my hand and forcing him to a sudden, abrupt halt. I did not raise my voice, but the absolute cold authority in my tone cut through his anger like a razor blade. "Take your hand off that radio, Chief," I commanded, my eyes locking onto his with unyielding intensity. "You are not sending a single patrol car within a 10-mile radius of that mansion tonight. You are going to order your dispatchers to establish a complete blackout zone around his zip code." The chief dropped his hand from the radio, his chest heaving with frustrated breaths. He was a good cop, a man who wanted to see a predator punished, but he was thinking like a local beat commander, not a federal tactician. "Why wait?" he argued, his voice hushed but urgent. "We have the forged documents sitting on the table in there. We have the live stream footage of him facilitating a false arrest. That is more than enough probable cause for a local warrant. If we take him down now, we completely humiliate him in front of your family and stop the bleeding." I shook my head, resuming my slow, calculated pacing down the hallway, forcing him to walk beside me and listen. "Because arresting him for local municipal charges right now is exactly how we lose the entire war," I explained, breaking down the tactical reality of white-collar criminal defense. "Think about the timeline, Chief. It is currently 2 in the morning. If your patrol units drag him out of his house for forgery, he will be booked into your local holding cell by 3. He is a wealthy, connected man. He will demand his phone call immediately. By 4 in the morning, a team of high-powered $1,000 an hour defense attorneys will be standing in your lobby, demanding his release. Since forgery and filing a false report are non-violent offenses, a sleepy night court judge will grant him a standard bail bond. By 6 in the morning, Trent will be walking out of your front doors a free man. I paused, letting the timeline sink into his mind. And the very second Trent walks out of this precinct, he will know the illusion is broken, I continued. He will realize that the local cops figured out his documents were fake, which means he will instantly assume the federal government is closely monitoring his accounts. The chief frowned, his brow furrowing as the strategic consequences began to materialize in his mind. But we would still have him on the local charges. He would still face prison time for what he did to you tonight. I do not care about the local charges, I fired back, my voice turning razor sharp. I do not care about a minor forgery conviction that his lawyers will plea deal down to 2 years of probation and a fine. I am hunting a transnational syndicate. Trent is not just a con artist stealing from my gullible parents. He is a central washing node for tens of millions of illicit dollars. Do you have any idea what a man like that does the moment he realizes law enforcement is closing in? I did not wait for him to answer. He executes a digital burn protocol. I explained, my words coming fast and precise. These offshore predators do not leave physical paper trails lying around their home offices. They use encrypted, decentralized servers hosted in jurisdictions that do not comply with United States subpoenas. Trent has a dead man's switch programmed into his network. If he feels the heat, all it takes is a single 12-character passcode entered into his phone, and every single hard drive he operates in the Cayman Islands is subjected to a military-grade data wipe. I pointed a finger at the chief's chest to emphasize the devastating stakes. If he wipes those servers, the Department of Justice loses a 2-year undercover investigation. We lose the encrypted ledgers that prove where the money came from. We lose the transaction histories of the other shell companies, and most importantly, we lose the ability to seize those offshore accounts and return the stolen millions to the hundreds of innocent victims he has already destroyed. If you arrest him for a bruised ego and a fake piece of paper tonight, you are actively helping him destroy the only evidence that can put him in a federal penitentiary for the rest of his natural life. The chief stood in the dim corridor, the frustrated color slowly draining from his face as the sheer magnitude of the situation settled over him. He slowly unclipped the radio from his shoulder and let his hand drop to his side, completely surrendering his local pride to the federal mandate. He was breathing heavily, his mind recalibrating to the massive scale of the trap I had built. "I understand, Special Agent," he said quietly, his voice devoid of its previous bluster. "If we spook him now, the snake sheds its skin and slithers into the grass. We lose the head and the body." "Exactly." I nodded, smoothing the lapels of my silk pajamas. "We need Trent to feel absolutely invincible. We need him to wake up tomorrow morning completely high on his own arrogance. He genuinely believes I am sitting in one of your concrete cells, crying my eyes out and facing decades in prison. He believes my parents are fully under his control, and he believes his new luxury resort development is about to secure him a massive payday. We must preserve that delusion at all costs." I paced back toward the heavy doors of the secure holding area, gesturing for the chief to follow me. "Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, Trent is hosting a lavish investor signing gala at his estate." I outlined, mapping the final steps of the operation. He has invited dozens of high-net-worth marks to celebrate the launch of his fake Caribbean project. To make it look legitimate, he has to perform a live, irrevocable transfer of capital into his offshore holding company. He is going to use my grandfather's $4 million as the anchor investment to prove to the other marks that the project is heavily funded. The very second his finger hits the execute button on his laptop to move those funds, he triggers the federal tracking protocol I embedded in the wire. I stopped and looked the chief directly in the eyes. When he hits that button, the money does not go to the Cayman Islands. It gets instantly routed into a secure Department of Treasury holding account. The moment the digital handshake is confirmed, my FBI strike teams breach every door and window of his mansion. He does not get bail. He does not get to call his fancy lawyers to negotiate a surrender. He gets tackled to the marble floor in front of his wealthy friends, his investors, and his 2 million livestream viewers. We seize his servers before he can type in the kill switch, and we recover every single stolen dime. A slow, profound realization washed over the chief's face. He finally saw the complete architecture of the vengeance I had constructed. It was not just about punishing a man who had wronged my family. It was about absolute, unavoidable, systematic annihilation. "That is why you want to stay in the holding cell tonight," the chief murmured, a look of deep respect settling into his features. "You are managing the timeline. If anyone from his camp calls the precinct to check if you posted bail, my desk sergeant confirms you are still locked in the basement." "Yes," I replied smoothly. "Let them pop their champagne tonight. Let my sister brag to her internet followers about how they finally took me down. Let my parents sleep soundly thinking they have secured their spot among the elite. Because tomorrow morning I am going to walk through their front doors wearing a federal badge, and I am going to personally burn their entire fantasy to ashes." The chief gave a sharp, definitive nod. "I will personally supervise your holding area special agent. No local officers will have access to you, and I will strictly monitor all incoming calls regarding your status. The precinct is yours." I thanked him and turned my back, walking toward the secure, isolated holding cells located deep in the basement of the building. I held my encrypted mobile device tightly in my hand, feeling the quiet, rhythmic buzz of incoming tactical updates from my federal strike team. The trap was flawless. The bait had been swallowed whole. The countdown to the morning gala had officially begun, and Trent had absolutely no idea that his perfectly planned victory lap was actually a death march. The private holding cell in the basement of the precinct was a stark contrast to the chaotic, frenetic energy of my penthouse just a few hours ago. It was perfectly silent, smelling faintly of industrial bleach and damp concrete. The chief of police had kept his word, isolating me in a secure VIP detention room far away from the general population and local officers. I sat down on the edge of the stiff vinyl-covered cot and leaned back against the cinder block wall. If a camera were positioned just over my right shoulder right now, it would capture a masterclass in digital surveillance. The tight frame would focus on the cold, unyielding concrete of the cell, framing the vibrant high-definition glow of my encrypted mobile device as I tapped into the public social media networks. I did not need to search hard to find what I was looking for. My sister Chloe was already dominating the trending pages. She had gone live exactly 12 minutes ago, and her viewer count was rapidly climbing past 300,000 concurrent watchers. I angled the phone, the bright blue light washing over my face in the dark cell, and watched my sister perform the greatest, most manipulative acting job of her entire shallow life. Chloe was sitting on a plush velvet sofa in the sprawling, ostentatious living room of the mansion Trent had purchased with other people's money. She was dressed in a soft, oversized cashmere sweater, intentionally styled to look vulnerable and small. Her makeup was a deliberate masterpiece of tragic distress, featuring slightly smudged mascara and perfectly flushed cheeks. She clutched a crumpled tissue in one hand, dabbing at eyes that were entirely devoid of actual tears. "I never thought my own flesh and blood could be so purely evil." Chloe sniffled into the camera, her voice trembling with expertly manufactured heartbreak. The live chat on the right side of my screen was a waterfall of rapid fire, text, a blur of crying emojis, and furious comments demanding justice for her family. "I am just so traumatized, you guys," Chloe continued, looking directly into the lens with wide, innocent eyes. "We trusted her. We gave her the keys to our grandfather's legacy, and she tried to leave my parents with absolutely nothing. She sat in her fancy penthouse bought with our stolen money, and she did not even shed a single tear when the police took her away. She is a monster." I watched her weave the narrative with a cold, analytical detachment. She was feeding her 2 million loyal followers a carefully curated story of betrayal, weaponizing their parasocial empathy to assassinate my character on a global scale. But then the camera shifted, and Trent walked into the frame. He sat down heavily beside Chloe, wrapping a protective, comforting arm around her shoulders. He looked appropriately somber, playing the role of the exhausted stoic patriarch who had just fought a brutal war to save his family from ruin. "It was a close call," Trent said, his voice dropping to a serious, gravelly pitch designed to project authority and reassurance. "If my financial team had not run a secondary audit on the trust integration, Maya would have successfully moved the entire $4 million into an untraceable offshore account by morning. But we caught her. We secured the assets, and we handed the evidence directly to the authorities. Justice is being served tonight. The chat went absolutely wild. Thousands of comments flew by calling Trent a hero, praising his business acumen, and blessing him for saving his vulnerable black in-laws from a greedy corporate thief. I let out a soft, dark chuckle that echoed in the empty cell. The sheer staggering irony of 2 million people praising a man who was actively robbing them blind was almost poetic. Chloe leaned her head against Trent's shoulder, wiping a fake tear from her cheek before taking a deep, fortifying breath. Her entire demeanor suddenly shifted. The tragic weeping victim vanished instantly, replaced by the resilient, triumphant businesswoman ready to pivot to a marketing pitch. But Trent and I decided that we are not going to let her darkness destroy our light, Chloe announced, her voice rising with sudden inspirational strength. We are not going to let her jealousy stop this family from achieving greatness. That is why tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we are moving forward with the grand launch of our Caribbean eco-resort. We are turning a night of tragedy into a morning of absolute victory. Trent gave a firm, resolute nod to the camera. That is right, he agreed smoothly. Tomorrow morning, we are hosting an exclusive live broadcasted investor signing at our estate. We have dozens of visionary partners joining us to officially fund the first phase of the development. We are going to sign the contracts, execute the initial capital transfers live on camera, and prove that nothing can stop this project. Not even a betrayal from inside our own house. I paused the live stream, the image of their triumphant smiling faces freezing on my screen. I lowered the phone, staring into the dark corner of the concrete cell as the tactical reality of Trent's announcement clicked into place. The pieces of the puzzle aligned perfectly in my mind, forming a crystal-clear picture of his exact financial strategy. Trent was not just hosting a party to stroke his own ego. The live broadcasted investor signing was a highly calculated, sophisticated digital smokescreen. As a forensic auditor, I understood exactly how banking algorithms flagged suspicious activity. If Trent simply wired $4 million of stolen trust money to a Cayman Island shell company on a random Tuesday morning, the sudden massive movement of capital would immediately trigger an automatic suspicious activity report at the Federal Reserve. It would flag the transaction for manual review, potentially freezing the funds before they ever reached international waters. But tomorrow morning, Trent was bringing dozens of legitimate high-net-worth investors into his home. They were going to sign contracts and wire their legitimate investment capital into his domestic holding accounts at the exact same time. He was creating a high-velocity transaction environment. By flooding his accounts with millions of dollars of clean incoming domestic wires, he was generating a massive volume of financial noise. He planned to slip the outgoing $4 million offshore wire right into the middle of that chaotic digital traffic. It was a textbook layering technique. He was using the legitimate investors' money to commingle with the stolen trust funds, masking the illicit offshore transfer in a blizzard of legitimate banking activity. He genuinely believed that doing it in public under the bright lights of a media event would make the transactions look entirely above board to any automated banking software. He was using my family's tragedy as a brilliant sympathetic distraction to execute a masterful international money laundering operation in broad daylight. I unpaused the video, a genuine smile of predatory satisfaction spreading across my face. He was smart. I had to give him credit for the sheer audacity of the maneuver, but he was playing checkers while I was running the entire federal board. The camera angle on the live stream shifted again as Chloe panned her phone to the right, bringing my parents into the frame. Desmond and Yvonne were sitting in ornate armchairs across the room, dressed in expensive loungewear, sipping wine from crystal glasses. They looked perfectly relaxed, completely unbothered by the fact that their eldest daughter was supposedly rotting in a jail cell just a few miles away. "Mom." "Dad," Chloe said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Do you have anything you want to say to the viewers who are sending us so much love right now?" My mother sat up straight, adjusting her posture for the camera. She looked directly into the lens, her eyes cold and hard. We just want to thank everyone for their support, Yvonne said smoothly, without a single ounce of hesitation or maternal grief. It is heartbreaking to realize that you raised a snake in your own home. But we are so blessed to have Trent. He is the real son of this family. We have officially cut all ties with Maya. She is entirely dead to us. We are only looking forward to the future now. My father raised his wine glass to the camera in a silent, arrogant toast, confirming my absolute excommunication from the family tree. I did not feel a single pang of sadness. I did not feel rejection. I felt completely, beautifully liberated. They had just publicly, on a recorded broadcast to 2 million people, severed the final emotional and legal ties connecting us. They had willingly shackled themselves to Trent's sinking ship, completely blinded by their own greed and their desperate, pathetic worship of his white-collar illusion. I tapped the screen, closing the social media application, plunging the cell back into near-total darkness. I opened my encrypted federal messaging application and pulled up the secure thread connecting me directly to my FBI tactical commander. My fingers flew across the digital keyboard, typing out a rapid, precise stream of operational updates. Target is utilizing a high-volume investor event at 1000 hours tomorrow to execute a commingled offshore layering protocol. The domestic wires will be used to mask the primary illicit transfer. I typed, summarizing Trent's exact strategy for the strike team. I paused for a fraction of a second, picturing my parents' arrogant, smiling faces on that live stream before typing my final tactical directive. Target has publicly confirmed all family members present in the residence are willing accomplices to the financial transition. Classify the entire estate as an active hostile crime scene. No exceptions for family. When the wire triggers the federal trap, authorize full tactical breach on all entry points. I hit send. The message encrypted itself and vanished into the federal network, officially sealing the fate of everyone sitting in that mansion. I placed the phone gently on the metal cot beside me and leaned my head back against the cold concrete wall. The heavy silence of the precinct basement settled around me, but inside my chest, the anticipation was deafening. The trap was locked. The bait was actively swimming toward the jaws. All I had to do now was wait for the sun to rise and let the federal hammer fall. The heavy silence of the basement holding cell did not last long. Less than 5 minutes after I sent the final breach authorization, the heavy steel door swung open. The chief of police stood there holding a steaming cup of black coffee and a ring of master keys. He had completely shed his panicked demeanor, replacing it with the sharp, focused energy of a cop ready to assist a federal raid. We moved out of the basement and up to a secure windowless briefing room on the 3rd floor. This was no longer a holding facility. It was my temporary tactical command center. If a camera were capturing the next 2 hours, the visual rhythm of the night would instantly shift into high gear. The lens would whip pan across the room in a rapid adrenaline-fueled montage. Quick cuts would show me slamming my encrypted mobile device into a high-speed docking station, throwing strings of complex code across a massive digital whiteboard. The scene would intercut with the FBI field office across town. Agents in crisp white shirts rolling up their sleeves in the cyber division. Tactical teams in black Kevlar checking their weapons in the armory. Heavy Velcro ripping magazines clicking sharply into place, and combat boots hitting the asphalt as the staging process officially began. I established a secure video link with my lead cyber analyst in Washington. We did not have time for pleasantries. We immediately pulled up the architecture of Trent's Cayman Island shell companies, mapping out the dummy accounts he planned to use for his morning layering protocol. The objective was not to freeze his accounts right now. Freezing them in the middle of the night would trigger an automated alert to his phone, spooking him into burning the servers and fleeing the jurisdiction. Instead, we were planting a digital guillotine. We synchronized our network with the Department of Treasury, creating an invisible ghost protocol. We set the digital tripwire so perfectly that the exact millisecond Trent's finger pressed execute to move my grandfather's $4 million, the banking algorithm would silently route the funds into a federal holding account. It would simultaneously sever his administrative access, locking him out of his own offshore network without triggering a single warning bell. It was a flawless digital ambush. With the financial trap armed, I turned my attention back to the physical illusion. Trent was deeply paranoid. A man who runs international Ponzi schemes does not just assume his enemies are defeated, he verifies his victories. I needed the local precinct's paperwork to look absolutely impenetrable. I sat down with the night shift desk sergeant, a veteran officer who typed with meticulous precision. We fabricated a complete bulletproof booking record. My name, my fingerprints, and a fake mugshot profile were officially logged into the municipal holding database. We flagged my status as an extremely high flight risk, ensuring the system reflected that no bail could be posted until a judge reviewed the case on Monday morning. We ran a live drill right there in the briefing room. I had the chief dial the front desk from his personal cell phone, pretending to be a concerned family member, asking about my status. The desk sergeant answered with perfect bureaucratic apathy. He confirmed that I was locked in a secure cell, that I had been denied bail, and that absolutely no visitors were permitted. It was a flawless performance. When Trent or my parents inevitably called at dawn to gloat and verify their victory, they would receive the exact bureaucratic confirmation they needed to feel like untouchable gods. Around 4 in the morning, a black government SUV pulled into the precinct's secure underground garage. An FBI logistics agent stepped out carrying a heavy garment bag and a tactical briefcase. He was escorted directly up to my command center. I unzipped the garment bag and ran my hand over the crisp, pristine fabric inside. I had specifically ordered this wardrobe change. I was not going to crash my family's elite high society gathering, wearing the wrinkled silk pajamas they had forced me out of my home in. I was going to walk through their front doors looking like absolute power. I changed into the sharp, tailored crimson suit. The deep burgundy color was intentional, a striking aggressive contrast to the sterile, muted tones my mother always demanded we wear to family functions. I strapped my leather shoulder holster into place, the comforting weight of my federal-issue sidearm settling against my ribs. Finally, I clipped my gold Department of Justice badge directly onto my lapel. I looked into the small mirror on the briefing room wall. The woman looking back was not the quiet, submissive daughter my parents thought they had broken. She was the executioner. The clock on the digital whiteboard ticked past 5:30 in the morning. The dark sky outside the precinct windows was just beginning to bleed into a pale, bruised purple. I opened the tactical communication channel linking me to the strike teams currently staging in unmarked utility vans a mile away from Trent's estate. The radio crackled with crisp, disciplined voices. Sniper Overwatch confirmed they had eyes on the perimeter. Cyber teams confirmed the Ghost protocol was green and holding steady. The breach units were locked and waiting for my final green light. The hardest part of any federal raid is the quiet hours just before the breach. I poured myself another cup of black coffee and stood by the glowing monitors tracking the digital pulse of Trent's network. In a few hours, the catering trucks would start arriving at the mansion. The valets would set up the red carpet. My mother would spend 2 hours in hair and makeup, desperately trying to look like a woman born into generational wealth. My father would practice his arrogant speeches about family legacy in the mirror. Chloe would set up her ring lights, eager to stream their false triumph to her millions of followers. And Trent would put on his most expensive tailored suit, completely oblivious to the thermal imaging drones already hovering silently above the roof of his home office. I reviewed the target acquisition list one last time. Trent was priority 1, the central node of the entire money laundering syndicate. But my tactical directive remained crystal clear. Every single person actively participating in the financial transition was classified as a hostile accomplice. My family had spent their entire lives treating me like a second-class citizen, mocking my caution and worshiping a white-collar criminal because he offered them a shortcut to prestige. They had laughed with pure joy while the police dragged me away in handcuffs. They had gone on a live broadcast to disown me and claim my hard-earned success as their own. They wanted to play high-stakes games with federal bait. Now they were going to pay the ultimate federal price. A green light flashed on the central monitor. It was an automated notification from the precinct desk sergeant. The call had just come in. Trent had used a blocked number to contact the local jail posing as a legal clerk to verify my custody status. The desk sergeant had fed him the fabricated booking record perfectly. Trent had swallowed the bait hook, line, and sinker. The final layer of his paranoia had been dismantled. He believed the path was totally clear to move the money. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the sharp adrenaline course through my veins. The trap was set. The bait was in place. The entire United States Department of Justice was standing right behind me, waiting in the shadows for my signal to strike. I picked up my encrypted radio, pressing the transmission button with my thumb. All units, hold your positions and maintain strict radio silence. I commanded, my voice echoing coldly in the briefing room. We wait for the sun to rise. We wait for the money to move. And then we bring the whole house down. Morning sunlight flooded the grand foyer of Trent's sprawling estate, painting the Italian marble floors in warm, luxurious gold. If you were watching through a camera lens, the sweeping establishing shots would capture an absolute masterclass in fabricated opulence. Towering floral arrangements framed the room, crystal champagne flutes caught the brilliant light, and dozens of high-net-worth investors mingled in bespoke suits and designer dresses. The atmosphere was intoxicating, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the dangerous illusion of limitless wealth. This was Trent's magnum opus, a perfectly curated stage designed to completely blind the elite marks in the room while he executed the greatest financial heist of his life. My family stood at the epicenter of the grand hall, absolutely radiating unearned triumph. Chloe held her phone mounted on a professional stabilizing gimbal, beaming her flawless face to an audience that had now swelled to nearly 3 million live viewers. She wore a stunning ivory silk gown, playing the part of the resilient, brave survivor with sickening perfection. Beside her, my mother Yvonne, draped in excessive borrowed diamonds, clinked glasses with wealthy socialites she had previously only admired in magazines. They were living their ultimate fantasy, completely oblivious to the federal crosshairs painted directly on their backs. A reverent hush fell over the opulent room as my father Desmond confidently stepped up to a sleek glass podium. He tapped the microphone, a broad, deeply arrogant smile stretching across his face. "Thank you all for gathering to celebrate this monumental family milestone," he boomed, his voice echoing through the massive estate and broadcasting directly across Chloe's live stream. "Last night, our family faced a terrible, heartbreaking betrayal. We had to make the agonizing decision to excise a bad seed from our bloodline to protect our legacy. My eldest daughter allowed jealousy and greed to corrupt her, and she is currently sitting exactly where she belongs, locked away behind cold steel bars. But tragedy breeds resilience. We survived the storm, and today we rise higher and stronger than ever before." The crowd of investors erupted into sympathetic, supportive applause. The live stream chat exploded with a rapid-fire stream of cheering emojis and validations. Trent stepped forward, soaking in the admiration like a king newly crowned. He moved to the polished mahogany desk positioned right beside the podium where the fraudulent offshore investment contracts lay waiting next to his sleek silver laptop. The domestic wire transfers from the eager investors in the room were already flooding his domestic accounts, creating the perfect chaotic financial smokescreen. All he had to do was initiate the final routing command to send my grandfather's $4 million to his Cayman shell company. Trent picked up a heavy gold fountain pen, flashed a blinding $1 million smile directly into Chloe's camera, and confidently reached his left hand toward the keyboard to execute the final irrevocable transfer. His finger pressed firmly down on the enter key, executing the offshore wire transfer. He expected the confirmation screen to flash a victorious green. Instead, his laptop screen instantly locked, turning a solid, blazing federal red. Before the confusion could even fully register on his smug face, the heavy custom-built oak doors at the front of the grand hall exploded inward with a deafening crash. The camera snaps into a rapid crash zoom, tracking the violent splintering of the wood as a heavily armored FBI tactical team swarms the opulent foyer. Federal agents flood the room from every single entry point, their tactical boots stomping across the Italian marble. Dozens of high-net-worth investors shriek in terror, dropping their crystal champagne flutes as operatives secure the perimeter in seconds. Chloe screams, stumbling backward into my mother. Then the chaotic scene shifts into absolute agonizing slow motion. The wall of black tactical gear parts right down the middle, creating a perfectly framed walkway. Through the shattered doorway, I step into the brilliant morning light. There are no handcuffs binding my wrists. There are no municipal police officers marching me toward a cell. I am wearing my sharply tailored crimson suit, the aggressive color commanding the absolute center of the room. Pinned directly to my lapel, catching the bright light of the crystal chandeliers overhead, is my gold Department of Justice badge. The sheer, unadulterated shock on my family's faces is a flawless masterpiece. My father, Desmond, stops mid-breath, his mouth hanging completely open as the arrogant speech he just delivered turns to ash on his tongue. Yvonne clutches her chest, the borrowed diamonds sparkling uselessly around her neck as her knees visibly buckle under the weight of reality. Chloe's perfectly manicured fingers go totally slack. Her heavy mobile phone slips from her grasp, crashing hard against the marble floor, but the camera keeps rolling, broadcasting the arrival of the federal government to her 3 million stunned viewers. Trent finally tears his eyes away from his locked, seized laptop screen and looks up at me. Pure primal terror washes over his face. The illusion of the untouchable white-collar genius shatters instantly. He drops the gold fountain pen and turns desperately, scrambling to run toward the rear patio doors. He does not make it 3 steps. 2 tactical agents hit him like a freight train, tackling him forcefully to the polished floor. The heavy thud of his body hitting the marble echoes across the silent room, pinning the so-called savior of our family firmly beneath the boots of federal justice. If a lens were pressed against the cold marble floor right now, it would capture me towering over Trent like a monolith. I slowly walked over to the mahogany desk, my crimson heels clicking with absolute authority against the stone. I picked up the fraudulent investment contracts he had been so eager to sign. The heavy gold fountain pen lay abandoned near his struggling hand. With one swift and decisive motion, I ripped the thick stack of paper squarely in half, letting the shredded pieces flutter down onto his tailored back. "Trent!" I announced, my voice projecting clearly across the stunned and silent room, so every single wealthy investor could hear. The Department of Justice Anti-Money Laundering Task Force has officially seized your Cayman Island shell companies. The domestic wire transfers you tried to use as a smokescreen this morning have been permanently frozen. Your entire network has been dismantled, and your offshore accounts are currently the legal property of the United States Treasury. The collective gasp from the room of elite investors was instantaneous. Panic swept through the crowd as they realized they had just narrowly avoided wiring their own millions into a federal black hole. I then turned my attention away from the criminal on the floor and locked eyes with my parents. If a camera were capturing this, it would need a tight, unforgiving close-up on Desmond and Yvonne to truly document the absolute devastation settling into their features. The arrogant pride that had puffed out their chests just minutes ago was completely gone. In its place was a hollow, suffocating realization. The shiny elite illusion they had sacrificed me for was evaporating right before their eyes. "You trusted a white-collar con artist over your own daughter's blood?" I said, my words striking them with surgical precision. "You let greed blind you, and you eagerly threw me to the wolves for a seat at a table that did not even exist. The federal government has seized the entire $4 million from Grandpa Silas's trust as illicit evidence in a money laundering operation. It is gone. Congratulations, you are officially bankrupt." My mother let out a strangled, breathless sob, clutching her husband's arm to keep from collapsing entirely. My father stared at me with wide, vacant eyes, finally comprehending that he had traded his family's true legacy for absolutely nothing. I did not offer them a single ounce of pity. I pivoted sharply on my heel and walked over to where Chloe's phone was still propped up against the wall, the lens perfectly framing the federal agents clearing the room. The live chat was scrolling so fast, it was a blur of pure internet hysteria. I leaned down, bringing my face right into the center of the frame, giving her 2 million viewers exactly what they wanted to see. I offered the lens one final razor-sharp smile. "Sorry to interrupt the broadcast," I said, my voice smooth and perfectly composed. This family's 15 minutes of fame are up. I reached out and tapped the screen, cutting the feed to absolute black.